to be kind of perplexing as to where might all this lead. I'm startled. Literally, I'm tracking this on a daily basis. I'm overwhelmed by how much information there is, and I think a part of the challenge that we all face is how does the general populace, who goes to work every day and has families to take care of, et cetera, how are they supposed to really get deep onto this and understand it enough to make their own decisions? And the crisis to me is that we really have these people reliant on our government agencies and our supposed media that should be investigating to take all this information, distill it, and then say, here's what you need to know. And I think, I want to separate fact from opinion. Right. My conclusion, or my own personal opinion, we can't trust any of these sources, to give us the information, which is why we're making this documentary, which will not, we're not going to be able to share this on social media.
Right.
So, because when we look at it, take a step back now, because we got into a lot of details, the big picture. Social media. People like Bobby Kennedy Jr., who will be in the series also, his social media account on Instagram shut down, and he said, all I'm doing is posting links to government websites.
That's correct.
And that becomes misinformation. U.S. citizens being called out by our White House as enemies of the state, basically.
Right.
Being pounced upon. The sleight of hand data, like the CDC saying 95% of hospitalizations are unvaccinated, but not really saying, well, the data was collected when nobody was vaccinated. So of course that had to be true. Matter of fact, it's startling that 5% were vaccinated at that point. And we can go on. And now we try to sort it all out. The one thing that I think is pretty fascinating to me, which gives me a glimmer of hope, is with all that, still only 55% of the people said, I'll do it. That to me says people intuitively know something is wrong here. What's your take on it?
It's interesting to look at the demographic of people who are not getting the vaccine. They are well educated. One of the strongest demographics of individuals not receiving the vaccine, their families, are PhDs.
Now that's it, because they're trying to paint a picture. It's a bunch of ignorant, people, in the Midwest that are bumpkins, that aren't getting it. But I read a study that said that one of the largest populations are PhDs, the highest educated. So keep going with that.
Right, and medical workers with these mandates are leaving their jobs in droves. I know I have personal instances of people that I've taught at the university where I teach who ended up as nurses who left their jobs because, and it's not because I was preaching anti-vaccine vitriol. I'm very tight-lipped in my university about my other life and some of the advocacy work and some of the research work that I do. I'm restricted from those things. But there was one instance in the county where I live where at an institution that employed 800 medical workers, 200 medical workers were ready to leave the job because they were unvaccinated.
Wow.
Okay, so we're hearing this over and over and over again. It's not and I can't stand the rhetoric because God loves the person who is in the Midwest that might be considered a bumpkin as much as a PhD or as much as an MD. They all make a difference. They all matter. Their opinions all matter. And so, this characterization is wrong on many different levels.
The elitist attitude, the coastal elitist attitude, toward the parts of the country that want to think for themselves and want a little liberty. I literally just took a 9-hour road trip with my kids. From Salt Lake City area all the way down into Arizona.
Wonderful.
And basically said, I want you guys to see, what America really is, and people who get up every morning, go to work, who have a wisdom about how to live life and to be independent, et cetera, as compared to how they're characterized by, these so-called coastal elites. who think that they know everything and that everybody else is not as smart as they are, therefore they should just get in line and follow their tyrannic edicts. So I find it maddening also. I mean, I have no patience for that sort of elitism and that arrogance.
Right.
And certainly I think it gets us into trouble. But I think the good news is that there is resistance. You'll never hear about the resistance here because our media will never report it. But
Right.
you cited it saying, first of all, it's PhDs saying, I know enough. I know how to read these studies, and I'm not getting this vaccine. And then it's also healthcare work. I mean, who knows better than healthcare workers? They're in the front line seeing
Right.
what's going on, and they're walking off the job. So that's got to tell you something. And I've also you can't get it again directly through the media, so you have to find the sources. But I'm also seeing that in Europe, a lot of rebellion. I mean, they're taken to the streets in Europe. Have you been tracking that at all?
Yes, I have. I've seen protests in Paris. I've seen protests in Berlin, all over Europe. And the Green Pass and the passport system is draconian over there, and it's getting worse. The countries like France and Germany are completely locked down and completely mandated for vaccinations. I believe that the leaders of this country are looking to them as the model for what they're going to do next, and that's very, very scary. But there's an uprising, and there's a movement there where, because of the loss of livelihood, because the loss of services and things like that, there are people that are counting the cost and paying the price. And the last thing that you do in this type of situation is take to the streets. I mean, what recourse do they have? A lot of them have lost everything already because of their choice in order to maintain the sovereignty over their body and maintain their health rather than taking a dangerous injection. My hat's off to them. I hope we see more of it in the United States.
Yeah, I think if they keep pushing in the direction they are now, especially with these mandates of the employers,
Right.
And you look at it and say, okay, I know what we'll do. Let's destroy all the small businesses that have less than 100 employees, through our shutdowns, and then we're going to force force everybody into being employed by bigger companies.
Exactly.
And then we're going to mandate they get vaccinated. So they're finding these workarounds to try to force this agenda, and it would still be unacceptable if there was clear, indisputable evidence that this is a rational thing to do. But it still would be a violation of our rights. But given everything we just talked about, during this whole conversation, to force it under those circumstances is criminal. And we're starting to see, I think, a growing chorus of well-credentialed scientists that are starting to speak out. Are you
Yes.
seeing that too?
I am seeing that as well. I'm seeing some brave individuals, especially in the medical community, that are looking at the way that the pandemic has been handled and is being handled, and they're saying this is completely and totally wrong, okay? Wrong from the get-go. There are practitioners that are being persecuted for those particular beliefs. America's frontline doctors, frontline COVID critical care workers are among them, and there's others that I don't know about. The coalitions that are starting to form up that are looking at early treatment of COVID versus massive vaccination, and looking at the sovereignty of the medical doctor. The medical doctor should trump the HHS.
Right.
The medical doctor should be able to prescribe something off-label and have your prescription honored by your local pharmacy. That's not happening. Okay?
Yeah, they want them to become automatons, that just
Exactly.
do what the NIH and the HHS and the CDC, prescribes. And if you veer off that, I mean, the whole point is you're educated to make decisions on the ground. And quite frankly, I think, data research on a macro level is always important. But the person who's there with the patients, treating them, I think has to have, and that relationship between the doctor and the patient, is sacrosanct, and that's where you make the decisions with the on-the-ground intelligence, that you're there, and these people who are treating these patients, at risk to themselves, their own health, treating them, and then being denied their ability to do what they think is best. And they're starting to speak out, and then of course they're vilified, like Dr. Corey, talking about ivermectin,
Right.
thinking he's coming to the Senate or the Congress to testify, and thinking that hey, guess what? I think I might have something here that could help a lot of people. Vilified
Exactly.
over and over again, and the data, and there's metadata, so we talk about early treatment, and ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, zinc, IV vitamin C, all these things, and they try to push it aside, saying it's just anecdotal, not good data. And first of all, there is some data, some clinical studies that are pretty compelling. But secondly, so what if it's only anecdotal? You're there dealing with a patient who's struggling and could die. Maybe I can take some measures here that won't hurt the patient and
Right.
may help. So that's a whole thing in and of itself.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. The whole idea of a patient and a doctor, point of care medicine, where signs and symptoms are being described, are being elucidated, the overall condition of the patient, what's their baseline health, everything, and then deciding, am I going to give ivermectin? Am I going to give hydroxychloroquine? Am I going to follow a protocol with zinc? And keeping those people out of the hospital. We're finding that hospitalization rates are leading to higher mortality rates.
No doubt.
Okay, and I'm hearing anecdotal stories of hospitalizations, especially people that are hospitalized and intubated, being a death sentence.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's getting worse and worse. And so these people are not given the recourse. There is no standard of care for early COVID-19 treatment. When you're Tony Fauci, it's basically vaccinate, 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 and then if you have to go to the hospital, we'll put you on a vent and we'll jack you up with some remdesivir, which doesn't work at all and it destroys your internal organs. And that is the standard of care. It is so absolutely wrong.
Yeah, it's and to your point, I was having a conversation with a critical care doctor, in a COVID ward, and he says he doesn't bother venting anybody. He said, it's not 100%, but almost 100% of the people he puts on ventilators die, so he just doesn't recommend it. He said he'll do it if the family insists, but he just doesn't recommend it.
Right.
So, and that's kind of disturbing. But again, you start putting the pieces of the puzzle together, saying, why are they so much against early intervention, earlier treatment? Where have we ever sent people home and said, hey, only if you get really sick, come back and talk to us, as compared to saying, let's do something for you now before it gets really bad? And it all adds up to saying, if there's any hope for early intervention, people won't get vaccinated. So, everything goes toward, this agenda, in the end here, which is a highly disturbing thing, is, to the conscience of humanity, in my mind, for people who are entrusted with it, with the health of nations, or the health of people, that they have this ends justifies the means mentality that keeps going on. And of course, there are a lot of people that might look at what we're saying, and I'd say fact check everything we talked about here. We're talking about when we have opinions and when we're saying this looks like this, and then we're also talking about data that we're citing that anybody can fact check and then draw your own conclusions. So I very much appreciate you taking the time to come all the way here to our studios and to sit down and have an extended and in-depth conversation, because I think you do have this unique experience, skill set, and ability to assess this breadth of information, looking at the big picture, and to help shed some light on it for us. So thank you so much for doing that.
You're very welcome. It's absolutely my pleasure. You're doing God's work here and being able to inform the public about exactly what's going on, exactly what the truth is, and I so appreciate it.
That completes part 2 of my 2-part interview with Dr. Brian Hooker. Man, is he just a wealth of information and can speak intelligently to key subjects when it comes to COVID. So I appreciate the fact that you were here to share this time with me so you can learn more about this. How do you think it would feel to be number 1 on a list of 12 people who are considered enemies of the state, enemies of people, to literally have the White House call you out as someone who is spreading misinformation, and the consequence of which is costing people their lives, which of course is just a great lie. Well, Dr. Joseph Mercola was #1 on the so-called Dirty Dozen list for spreading vaccine and COVID disinformation, or sometimes they use the term misinformation. But let's actually sit down and have a conversation with him and see if any of this is not the truth. I'll let you be the judge. He's an amazingly courageous human being who for decades has had positive impact on people's lives, helping them take control of their health. And this issue of COVID is something that he's felt compelled to speak out about, and I want you to hear what he has to say. Dr. Joe Mercola, thanks for taking the time here. You have special experience and expertise in this area of COVID. And I've watched events unfold recently that have been unprecedented. And, #1, this so-called Dirty Dozen, or the people who are spreading the most disinformation. You were #1 on that list. And #2, literally the White House calling out U.S. citizens, right? And accusing them of causing death and mayhem, basically. Because of them speaking publicly about their positions on certain health issues. So tell me, how the experience of all this has been, because I've watched it from the outside, as all of us have, from the inside, from being you.
Well, I'm beyond grateful. I appreciate the attention because it just allows us to extend our platform and share the truth with more people. I mean, since we've had these discrediting campaigns, our views have almost doubled. So that's really good from my perspective. But I am not angry at all. I mean, I try not to get angry at all nowadays. I think it's a very unwise emotion to have. And there's other strategies that are far better. But I understand the reasoning behind it. It's sad and disappointing to see that once you understand the big picture, it makes perfect sense. But what the conventional media has failed to do, or I think consciously, because they know, is they've all accepted this report issued last year, actually, this report that everyone's jumping on, the New York Times and CNN and a wide variety of other media outlets. It was issued last year. Nothing's changed. It was issued, this is interesting, Patrick, it was issued by a UK company that was started a year and a half ago. It's called the CCDH, the Center for Countering Digital Hate. Classic Orwellian doublespeak, because they are actually causing digital hate. But they have an opaque funding history. In other words, you cannot find out who's funding it. It's funded by dark money. We believe a large portion of it comes from a Swiss philanthropist who's known for funding these types of projects. And actually, the guy, the CEO of it, Imran Amin, I believe his name is an unregistered foreign agent, and we've reported him to the federal government, and most likely he's going to wind up in prison. What's so amazing about this is that none of these media have ever bothered to question the source of this report. They just accept it as true, like it's like Reuters or United Press. I mean, it's just somewhat surprising and disappointing at the same time. So that's one point. And then I think the other issue is that I've come to realize, I mean, we can go on for hours and hours discussing the details, but essentially what's happened is the people behind this strategy, and it is a very sophisticated strategy, have essentially created a mass psychosis in our culture. It literally is a massive psychosis that's essentially delusional. And they've been able to do this because have the ability, thanks to technology, to leverage and amplify fear to enormous levels. And it's fear in combination with nearly total control of the communications and authorities in spreading propaganda. So fear, this propaganda just amplifies the fear. And then they implement strategies like lockdown or social isolation. So you cannot, it's very difficult to talk to other people and communicate. So this is a strategy that has been well known and well documented through many animal behavior trainers. If you want to get effective training effects, you put the animals in isolation. And that's what they're doing with us humans. So this whole compound has resulted in this mass psychosis. And actually, it isn't the first time it's happened. There's other examples would be the Salem witch trials, in which you've killed many women were killed. There's some towns that didn't have any women left after these. It was irrational behavior that wasn't based in truth. It's just this psychosis that develops. So, and they haven't affected everyone, but they've affected a large percentage of the population, perhaps the majority, I don't know. So essentially they've lost their ability to become objective and rational and think clearly. They can present it with facts, but they just ignore them. And they're so convinced that what they're hearing from the government and the public health authorities is absolute truth, when in fact, someone in their family could get the vaccine, be injected, and literally die with the vaccine needle still sticking in their arm. And then they would go out the next day and get a booster because they believe in it and it's safe and effective. They've just abandoned their rational thought process, which is sad. Yeah. It is really sad because the information is out there. I'm not the only one that's supplying this. There are many of us who are telling the truth, and many conventional physicians who are absolutely pro-vax, been pro-vax their whole life. I mean, one great example is Dr. Robert Malone, who's an MD, not really a PhD, but he should have a PhD out of Salk Institute. And he's the co-inventor of the actual platform, the messenger RNA technology. He's been a vaccinologist for 4 decades. So how much more of a vaccine advocate could you be than him? But he is turned around and said that what they're doing is wrong. There are other physicians like Peter McCullough, who is a very well, not written, but has many studies published, hundreds of studies. He's the editor of 2 journals. He's on many review boards. And he and Malone both have come out. They're both traditional, well-respected and well-credentialed as questioning what they're doing, because with respect to safety, because they really abandon all the conventional safety standards. They essentially eliminated the control groups from the original control studies or vaccine safety trials. There was I don't know if the placebo got another vaccine. There's a trick that they use frequently in vaccine studies, is because there's a control, and the control should be a placebo, something like normal saline, essentially salt water they inject. But for many of these studies, they use another vaccine, a vaccine that's even more toxic than the one they're measuring, like meningitis.
I heard that. When I heard that, and I was wondering, I said, can that possibly be true that
a
placebo control, that the sham is actually a vaccine intervention, just a different vaccine? That made no sense to me as far as study design.
Oh, absolutely, because you're rationally thinking, but they use this to deceive and manipulate people, and that's really the crux of what's happening here, is deception and manipulation with their propaganda to essentially incentivize people and motivate and bribe them into taking this vaccine. And my view is that one of the primary motivations for it is they want to eliminate the control group, because if they can convince everyone to get this vaccine, then there is no control group. Right. There is no control group. But they're not going to be successful. There's just no way they're going to do it. Their current effort, because all the bribes have seemed to be failed. I mean, they had $1 million, $5 million lotteries. Now Biden wants to give them $100 if they get the vaccine. Actually, COVID injection, it really isn't a vaccine.
Well, we'll talk about that in a moment. Let me ask you this, because you had mentioned this earlier, as far as how there's been, I mean, that New York Times article that came out about you was extraordinary, that they really gave that much attention to you. Obviously, it was negative as it was pointed at you. But if I was viewing data correctly, your book, The Truth About COVID, went to #1, on Amazon for days after the article had
4
appeared.
days in a row was #1, which is pretty extraordinary. I've never had a book do that before.
Are they Yeah, I don't know what kind term to use, but are they idiots in the sense that they're trying to discredit you, and it seems like they're actually fueling your audience and actually promoting you. And as the old adage goes, I don't care what you say about me, just spell my name right.
Yeah, yeah, that's certainly true here. They're not very strategic. I believe they're regretting what they did. And they wish they wouldn't have. They were using me as an example, because I was promoted as the #1 spreader of misinformation on a flawed study. Because in an article I wrote on it, we showed there's 36 people in conventional media, like Tucker Carlson being the #1. And I'm a fan of Tucker, but he's reaching a lot more people than I am, for sure. So
Right.
they figure if they can take the small guys out like us, then that's their next step, is to go for the big guys, the people who really do have the reach. And I'm not hopeful that they'll be able to do that. It's just that it's a stepwise strategy. You've got to bite off small pieces before you get to the bigger fish.
What caused you to write your book?
Well, we publish a newsletter still every day. We have a newsletter that comes out. We have 2 articles. Usually we go through dozens, maybe 100 articles in a day to find the best articles to publish. And it's really difficult. There's so much coming at us, especially with all this COVID pandemic nonsense as we're going on isolation or not working, and just your whole lifestyle being upended. So it's really difficult to read a lot of stuff. I mean, there's just so much things coming at you. So we thought it would be best to take the best of what we've written over a certain time period and condense it into an easy to read book that explains it all in one place. So it makes it easy and simpler to do. It's a strategy we've used in the past. I mean, we give away our information free. There's no cost for it, but we've had to take it down, unfortunately. So, I mean, you don't even have to buy the book. I would typically say just go to the site and read it, but it's even if our site was still up, it's still complex. You have to do the search, and it's not really condensed in a way that's going to put it all together in one place.
Why'd you have to take it down? Why'd you feel like compelled to do that?
Well, there was a lot of personal threats to me and my company. So we thought it was best to do this strategy. Hopefully at some point in the future, we will have it back up again, probably under the protection of a private membership association. So, because I mean, freedom of speech, the First Amendment is really being threatened. So it has been. I mean, the censorship and the banning is just incredible what they've been able to get away with. So it was primarily a defensive move on our part. So I'm sad to do it, but the articles weren't burned, they weren't deleted. They're just unavailable at this time.
So basically, I guess the concern is, and the concern isn't just newspapers and reporters, but even the federal government, I'd imagine, right? That they come and they dig around, they find stuff, and then you've gotten letters from
Sure.
varying
It's like
entities.
you see YouTube channels, or even I think the Tokyo Olympics is a good example. The guy was the head of the Tokyo Olympics. Literally in 1998, he wrote a post about something, and he had to resign because it was 20 years ago, 25 years ago.
Wow.
So I mean, who knows what we wrote? Because my newsletter's been up for 25 years. So it was really taking it offline to make sure that they don't find some twisted perversion and use that as a justification for some offensive move on their part, because they probably got the Department of Justice coming after me and a variety of other federal agencies, Federal Trade, FTC. They've got a large arsenal at their disposal, and we've got lunatics, absolute pure lunatics like Dr. Peter Hotez, who wrote a editorial or a letter, I can't remember which, in Nature. That's one of the most prestigious journals in the world. And he said, people like me that are spreading this misinformation, we should have directed cyber warfare attacks at.
Wow.
Because we're bioterrorists. It's an absolute replication of classic replication of Orwellian doublespeak, where they're perverting the meanings to the exact opposite.
Yeah. Well, think about it, because they're basically suggesting terrorist action, if you will, and accusing you of being the terrorist when all you're doing is providing free information for people. And here's the thing I find, well, I don't know if it's most disturbing might be the censorship, but I find this to be very disturbing, is the fact that they never actually allow a debate over what they think the disinformation is, right? They just sweepingly say they're supplying disinformation because you're questioning the vaccine, but they don't actually take the specific assertions and say, here's what's wrong with this one, here's what's wrong with that one. There's no debate. It's just anybody who doesn't toe the party line, we're going to have to decimate and whatever, and we can justify that because people will die because of their so-called disinformation, as compared to saying, let's debate it.
Yeah, and the party line is whatever the CDC/WHO say, World Health Organization, and the WHO is virtually nearly 100% controlled by Bill Gates, and we can go into details on that if you want more information. But it's a Bill Gates organization. He's the primary funder, the primary funder of anyone in the whole world, any country. It's Bill Gates. So obviously he's big into vaccines. So there's no debate, and it is literally impossible to have informed consent on this vaccine unless you have all the information. And when they say, some of the few news agencies who do point out my misinformation, every time I've heard it, it's always me quoting a study that disputes what the narrative is. But it's a study. It's not like I'm doing some random editorial and just rambling. We're discussing a study that disputes what they say. And they say, oh, they took this Italian study. He cites this, so it's just mind-boggling that they fail to engage the population with this dialogue. And you have to have a dialogue if you're going to have informed consent. There's no way around it. And their intention is to suppress all information that's counter to it and essentially censor everything, which makes it really effective to continue this mass psychosis. Yeah. It's really one of the primary tools that they're able to achieve it with.
Well, this is the thing. I think this has gone far beyond a vaccine issue, right? I mean, the vaccine
is a freedom issue. It's ultimately a freedom issue.
It's ultimately a freedom issue because we're looking at tyrannical powers that are being
global tyranny, right?
That are being imposed under the guise of an emergency situation, emergency powers. You've got a vaccine that's being rolled out, and that's a part of it, and there's a whole debate about that. But there's also all these shutdowns of businesses, and the civil liberties are taken away. And to me, the one that is the linchpin of it all is freedom of speech. Your right to be able to speak and for people to be able to listen if they choose to, and to engage in public discourse. And science dies without free speech. Truth dies without free speech. Now it's just a matter of either you're going to promote the agenda or propaganda that we tell you to, or we cancel you, we delete you, etc., which is what it seemed like they try to do with you. But let me ask you this, because you would have, I think, a better pulse on this than almost anybody. Is the resistance to what's going on bigger than what we might understand?
Really can't honestly answer that, because I'm not networking with a lot of outside groups and certainly not doing polls and finding what it is. But my suspicion is it may be, because what can we rely on? Conventional mainstream media, and pretty much everything they tell you is not true. So they're going to, if there is a difference, then we wouldn't know it, even if there was, at least from the mainstream media. And it's this fascinating thing. The most recent one that just blows my mind. I mean, we found some articles showing that they had these bots on these telephones, like hundreds of phones, just blasting social media with all different names, but the same message. Oh, they were faking physicians to say they just got back from the ER, and 99% of the cases were the ones who weren't vaccinated. Well, this was fake information that came up from the CDC in January before the results of the vaccine got deployed. But if you do the results today, it's the reverse. 70, 85, 90% of anyone who has COVID now is someone who's been vaccinated.
Wow. Those so-called breakthrough cases, right?
Yeah, breakthrough cases. Yeah, breakthrough to minimize the potential concern about ineffectiveness.
But let's talk about that for a second, because that data and where they said over 90%, I don't know if it was 99%, but the vast majority of people who are getting COVID were unvaccinated. But that was false data, right? Or
it was fake data, 100%. anything new will say the exact opposite. A report by the CDC director, Rachel, I forget her last name, but she was saying, yes, admitted on national TV that the COVID injection does not provide protection against infection.
Right.
It doesn't. It
Well, no,
simply doesn't. It
They've
never
never,
did.
they never claim. I mean, the claim is it just softens the blow, right?
That's what they wanted you to believe.
Yeah.
Yes, the average person who got the injection, and they believed that they could now be safe to visit their elderly parents.
Right.
They
But
got it
it's
for
not
them.
true.
They weren't even doing it for themselves. Most of these people, they're doing it for people they loved.
And I think you're making a really good point here, because many people that I spoke to, exactly that, they really didn't like the idea of having the vaccine, but they felt like they were protecting elderly parents or people they love.
Right.
I can't tell you how many people said, well, I just thought I should take one for the team, because they knew that their personal risk was very low. They were younger, they were healthy, et cetera. And it's got to feel like a betrayal to find out, well, that doesn't really protect the loved ones. You still can get and shed the virus, right? So that is kind of, I think, when people really catch hold of that could create some rebellion. I also heard that a lot of the data, when they said X% people were unvaccinated, that data was taken very early on, before the vaccine was really disseminated. So there was no. Yeah.
Those deaths come from January.
By January, there weren't very many people vaccinated.
No, hardly any. No, it was hard to
hardly.
get. It was logistically challenging to get the vaccine back.
But I mean, I can't imagine how disingenuous it is to put out that data saying, "Oh, look."
Well, it's part of the propaganda. It's very sophisticated, very clever. Plus, social media enhances it. We've never had these tools. This is the most sophisticated propaganda campaign in the history of the human race. We have never had these types of tools before, and they're leveraged to the hilt. But I firmly believe they're not going to get away with it. They will ultimately fail. I think it's going to get worse before it gets better, but I do believe they're going to self-destruct. I just don't want to be around when Goliath falls, because it's going to be bad.
So, in your view, man-made virus?
That's not even, that's a joke. It's 100% man-made. There's an irrefutable proof. You've got patent proofs, you've got research grant proofs, you've got this research papers showing it. We broadcast it in February of 2020. We've known this for a year and a half. But now it just came out, and then we were banned on Twitter. We were banned on, they deleted our post for saying this, that now is being accepted as true. There is just irrefutable documentation showing this. It's 100% man-made gain of function research. The records go back to 20 years, 20 years to show that.
Yeah, and I've seen those records, and this is, but here's, I think one of the big things that people need to observe, and you just said it, and I'm not saying this politically as a pro or anti Trump, for example, but what I do know is that when he suggested it, the media, everybody railed against the thought of it. I know that so you were just talking about your posts about this being man-made a year and a half ago were censored, right? For you even suggesting it. And now all of a sudden we're a year and a half later and everybody says, oh yeah, you know what, it is man-made. So
they couldn't deny it. The proof was irrefutable.
Right, but now this is the whole point is saying that if you have something that you post and you want to suggest it, then and a year and a half ago you're literally censored for it and vilified for it. But it turns out later to be true. So how many other things are being censored now that are true, that are going to, that come out, a year, 2 years later and say, wow, this was found to be true too, because these things these paths lead somewhere, right? Meaning because think about it, policymakers make decisions based on what they think is true, and if they can't get to the truth or there's no discourse around the truth, then we're making bad decisions. We have no choice but to make really bad decisions.
Yeah. So, I've been doing this for decades, right? 25 years, and I'm used to the discrediting. They've tried to get me in so many different ways. They tried to take away my license 3 times. They've been unsuccessful every time because it was fraudulent suits that made no sense, and we won every single time. Mm-hmm. So they tried, and usually it's because I'm ahead of the thing, the pack. Once they try to take it away because I exposed the fraud of mammography.
Mhm.
It's an absolute fraud, and it really doesn't work that well at all. And they tried to take my license away for that, even though I wasn't treating patients, for it at all. And it was a freedom of speech issue. So
You had an
they
opinion.
lost on that
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, you had an opinion, and because you had an opinion, they suddenly think that they need to
Right.
delicense
And it was based on a study published in the most prestigious journal. It was like New England Journal of Medicine. I was forbidden to talk about it because it blasted the mainstream narrative. So I am no stranger to this, and it makes perfect sense. I understand what they're doing. And, and it's not just me. I mean, I'm just a family physician who retired to spread truth and basic information so people don't have to suffer needlessly and die prematurely because they've been exposed to pharmaceutical propaganda. But there are research scientists who committed their whole lives who've just been destroyed. And I've got, I have a business that supports me, but many of these people, they are fired from jobs. That's their only source of income. And then they're discredited. I mean, they literally destroy these people. I mean, Fauci, if you read the books on Fauci, Robert Kennedy's got one called The Real Tony Fauci coming out in the fall. It's just unbelievable and exposes his crimes. This guy should be in prison till he's dead. And then beyond that too, for what he's done. I mean, he's responsible for killing 1/3 people with AZT in the AIDS epidemic. If you read it, you'll find out what he's done with COVID is an exact replication of what he did with HIV. No difference. It's just worse. He didn't change his colors. And anyone who opposes him is just crushed, destroyed, decimated. He has such enormous power. That guy has been responsible for allocating over $1 trillion in federal funding, $1 trillion since he's been in his position for 50 years with the NIH. So, and he knows who it goes to, and he gets this whole mill, and he's got these principal investigators at all these different universities, and it's just it's a cabal essentially. And if you go against them, you are just destroyed. Wow. So fortunately, they're trying to destroy me, but everything I do is legal. We've got incredible counsel to advise us and guard us. And I do have alternate revenue streams that they can't take away. I don't work for a university. I don't treat patients. I'm glad I stopped doing that, because they would have put not a clone, a shill, someone in there. I forget the name they call them. And then tried a shill. Yeah. Whatever it is, and then sue me to death for something. So I haven't seen patients for 15 years to avoid that strategy that they would use to remove me from what I'm doing.
Well, this is all, to say the least, quite disturbing, and I know that you've been a focus in this whole witch hunt, but I certainly appreciate the work that you have done and continue to do. And the fact that you continue to publish your newsletter, even though you had to take down the archives, for personal protection and protection of the people that work in your company. And any final thoughts around this before we close?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get people discouraged. I think ultimately we will win. And I would encourage people to seriously review both sides of the vaccine issues. There's a lot of information out there before you get it. And if you've gotten it, before you get another booster. So rethink that seriously. And what can you do instead? There's like a lot of things that you can do. I've got them in my book. It's on my website. But basically make sure your vitamin D levels are optimized. And the only way you can do it is getting blood tests. It needs to be between 60 and 80 nanograms per milliliter if you're United States, 100 to 150 nanomoles per liter if you're outside the US. And then you want to make sure you do something to make sure you're engaging in lifestyle choices that cause your body to burn fat as a primary fuel and not sugar, because most 80 to 90% of the people are metabolically inflexible, and they've lost the ability to burn fat. So one of the simple strategies doesn't cost, and vitamin D is not an expensive supplement if you take it, but you don't even have to swallow a supplement. I haven't swallowed vitamin D for over 10 years. You can get it if you live in a warm environment like Florida and you go out regularly with minimal clothing on, like a swimsuit. and don't have to take vitamin D. But what the other strategy is intermittent fasting, where you compress, or time restricted eating is a more accurate term. We compress your eating window to 6 to 8 hours, and that will cause your body to start to burn fat for fuel, which is a powerful strategy because when you're metabolically flexible, your immune system works really well. And the other big thing, it's a simple one, I'm writing a book on it now, is to avoid most all omega-6 fats. There's a dangerous fat in there called linoleic acid, which most of us have 20 to 30 times as we normally consume. And as a result, it causes severe oxidative damage to your cells and your mitochondria and your DNA and your proteins. So the key take home is to stop eating vegetable or seed oils, things like sunflower, safflower, corn oil, and even oils like olive oil still have significant LA in there. And that's if it's a real deal from these specialty shops where you're paying $30, $40, $50 for a quart. But most olive oil, 80% of it, in fact, Patrick, is adulterated with these inexpensive, cheap seed oils that are full of linoleic acid. So you've got to be really careful. Avocado oil would be another one. It's adulterated just like olive oil, most of them. So avoiding the seed oils doesn't mean you can't have snacks or healthy snacks, baked goods, but any processed food, for the most part, is going to use seed oil. If you go into a restaurant, if they have any sauce, 100% it's going to be a vegetable oil or seed oil that's going to be really high linoleic acid. So I really caution people to go out to eat. And actually, if you believe in what we're saying and you're not vaccinated, like if you live in New York, you're not going to be able to go out to eat because you should show proof of vaccination, and it's kind of spreading. Yeah. So it won't be an issue for many of us, but you just got to be careful and what you're eating, because what you're eating is ultimately going to contribute to your total health. And, it's just shocking that they wouldn't encourage people to do these simple strategies that are inexpensive. And the only side effect is you get healthier, that you lower your risk for heart disease, cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's, age-related blindness. So these are all things that you go, and arthritis. So that's the side effect. I mean, you get healthier. You're not going to be spending as much time or any time in the ICU or dying prematurely or suffering needlessly with pain that you shouldn't have. So, because all these diseases that we get, they're almost always related to those factors. Now, obviously, the art of medicine is quite sophisticated, and there's a lot of details in there. But if you are metabolically flexible, if your vitamin D level is optimized, and you're not eating processed foods, especially seed oils, those are the foundational strategies for improving just about every disease known to man.
As you talk about this, and it just makes too much sense to say, if you're really concerned about COVID and your vulnerability, getting healthy is, the best assurance you could get. As we just discussed, even that, you can get the vaccine, you still get COVID, even if if you thought the vaccine might work, you still are at risk. But this leads me to maybe a last subject that we can talk about here, which is your views on things like ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, and zinc. Those interventions, which seem to be much safer and maybe very efficacious. What have you found around those?
Well, I'm somewhat anti-drug, but those two, Plaquenil or hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, have been around a long time, and there's millions, maybe billions of doses that have been used, and the well-documented toxicity, I think it's even indicated in pregnant women and children. Mm-hmm. So I believe, maybe not both of them, but certainly ivermectin, I believe. So yeah, they can be used. I mean, I prefer different strategies that I've personally.
Can you talk about those?
Well, I like nebulized peroxide with the nebulizer, and I've done videos on those to walk people through that. And I think it's a really powerful strategy because it can optimize your microbiome, and your gut flora are really largely responsible for how healthy you are. So in addition to destroying any pathogens in your upper airways, that when you have them there, they can also disturb your microflora, microbiome actually.
Would you do that? Can I ask you? Would you do that prophylactically, or would you?
Oh yeah. Okay. I do it pretty much almost every day or every other day. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
So and it's basically a diluted. What concentration is the? It's a food grade hydrogen peroxide, I guess you'd recommend.
Yeah. Most food grade you buy is about 12%. So you would dilute that like 100 times. You basically 0.1%. So yeah, it's a big dilution. You do not use 12% to nebulize that. I mean, even the stuff you buy in the pharmacy, which has stabilizer in it, which is 3%, you would still dilute that like 30 times.
So you want it under 1%, concentration, right?
Yeah, hundredth. Yeah, and you just mix it up with clean, usually saline distilled water, and you put some salt in it, like about a teaspoon and a pint of water, so it's normal saline, because you don't want to be inhaling and nebulizing distilled water. That would be dangerous, because there's a something called osmolality that can damage your tissues. So, but this is where the virus resides. It resides in your upper airways and your lungs, obviously. So I've suggested this peroxide protocol to probably a dozen people or so. And David Bronstein, who is a family medicine physician in Michigan, has done 200 people. So between the two of us, we've got, he's treated them. I've only suggested to people, but he's actually published his results as an anecdotal trial, clinical trial, and he's got it published in a peer-reviewed journal. So he has not had a failure. I've not had a failure until one person. So it's almost 300 people. And she failed for like 2 days, because if you're going to get better with peroxide, it's literally with that day, certainly by the next day. If it doesn't work in 2 days, it's not going to work. And then you might have to elevate it up to another even more potent oxidative therapy, like ozone, intravenous ozone, which is a little bit more difficult to find, certainly more expensive, but it's more effective than nebulized peroxide. And this woman who failed the nebulized peroxide, she responded immediately to the ozone. So it's the next level up. It's for the one in, the few people out of 1,000 who don't respond to that. That would be the next level. So I think these oxidative therapies utilize your body's own immune system in a way that's quite profound and superior, with virtually no side effects. I mean, there are no side effects from the 0.1% hydrogen peroxide. It's almost water, it's so dilute. I mean, it's 30 times more dilute than the stuff you buy in the grocery store. So that's what I like first. But I have no problems with people taking ivermectin or even, I mean, there's something that Dr. Paul Merrick developed. He's a physician, intensive care physician, and I think he founded the FLCC, the Frontline Critical Care Community. And he's noted for developing the MATH Plus protocol, and that stands for methylprednisolone, A for ascorbic acid, intravenous vitamin C, T is for thiamine or vitamin B1, and H is for heparin. And they integrate also ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. But actually, I mean, the process, it was on my list of things to do today. There was just a study published out about a letter to the editor in one of the infectious disease journals that brought this up and support for. So I'm going to try to get that to Dr. Merrick and see if they can start integrating this into their protocol, because that really needs to be there. And he's a very respected intensive care physician. But even guys like him, they're censored, they're banned. I mean, you couldn't get more traditional than this guy, but he's still banned. I mean, he's so traditional, he won't even let me interview him.
And I just want to say, clearly, make sure if you who are watching right now, to just make sure that that you really get a lockdown protocol, and how you're diluting, et cetera. You don't want to get the hydrogen peroxide dilution wrong. It could be a problem. But if you can get it right, where it's maybe 0.1%, make sure you have salt, et cetera. That's important.
That's why I like doing it every day, because you're doing it. So if something comes up, you just increase the frequency. But, I do it prophylactically. I just gave a lecture at my office, and we had a few thousand people there. It was outside, but I still, I do it, because you don't know. I mean, we still don't know any potential risk of exposure to people who've been vaccinated. We don't know. We don't know. So I think it's wise to do it every day, just from that perspective. Because if you have any social contact in the public, you're going to be exposed. Half the population's vaccinated. So who knows how long the stuff that they're transmitting or it really isn't technically shedding, but eliminating lasts for. We don't know.
Yeah, they could shed if they were exposed and infected, but So, and I think, I love the fact that you have these really low to no cost things that activities that people can engage in that, show great promise and efficacy, at least anecdotally. And I think, there's been a lot of research published. I was reviewing some research on ivermectin recently, specifically for COVID, that was, I thought, mind-boggling. And again, I'm like you. I'm categorically pretty much anti-drug, except that if somebody's infected, and as compared to what the traditional things are that they recommend, this makes a whole lot more sense.
Remdesivir, or $3,000 a pop, or this COVID jab. Come on, it's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer when you do the objective analysis.
Yeah. Well, as always, again, I very much appreciate all the work you're doing. I appreciate you taking the time to share right here.
Yeah, and people can continue to see my work. I mean, as you mentioned, I deleted 15,000 articles in all the 25 years we've had, but I still publish a daily newsletter. We continue to publish what we did, but it's just ephemeral. So it's only up for 48 hours. So anyone can still go to our site and subscribe, get all this information and all the updates that we have and anything new. We really have some of the best articles up on the net, widely circulated. So, and if you want to post it anywhere, we do not have a copyright on it. So you're free to take it and post it and do anything you want with it.
Yeah, I've seen your articles shared very liberally, and I was happy to see that. So just going to Mercola.com, that's the way to find this information.
Yeah. There's not much there anymore, just 4 articles. Not a big treasure trove like it used to be, but it changes every day.
Yeah.
So.
That's awesome. Well, again, Dr. Joe Mercola, thanks for the stands that you take and the people that you help, and I appreciate you spending time here with us.
Well, thanks for having me on and allowing me the opportunity to share some of my experiences with this, and hopefully help some people.
That completes my interview with the amazing Dr. Joe Mercola. Again, isn't it incredible that our White House is calling him out as an enemy of people when all he wants to do is help them regain control of their health and let them know the truth when it comes to health and well-being? Anyway, you can see he's an amazingly courageous and knowledgeable man, and I was very grateful that he took the time to sit with me so I can share what he understands with you. That concludes episode 7. We're moving down the track now. We're a 9-episode docuseries. Thanks for being here, man. You're a real trooper for hanging in there, getting through this whole episode. Here we are, you and I together right now. So excited that we can share this with you. Also know that if you haven't already taken a look at our packages, take a look now. We're in the free viewing period still for a little while, and you can find the one that's right for you and make that investment and know that you have our gratitude. If you already have purchased your package of COVID Revealed, thanks for doing so. Make sure you share it. That's going to conclude episode 7. I'll see you in episode 8.
If you speak out against a vaccine you don't think is safe, suddenly you're this anti-vaxxer, and it's become like conspiracy theorists. It's just a word to brainwash everybody that you're a Looney Tune if you ask for safety in your vaccines. Lockdown is not what we do in medicine. We talk about quarantine, and never once since time immemorial in Hippocrates have we quarantined the well. We always quarantine the sick, not the well. But lockdown, that's a term you use for prisoners. If somebody mandates you to put something in your body, then whether it's the government or your boss, then it means you don't own your body. They do.
And this is the first time in history of the 140 years of our pharmaceutical medical history in America that there's ever been a disease where we said, wait till you're really sick before you go get treated. Even a parent or a coach of a little league team without training of any kind. If a kid sprains their ankle, they don't look at that kid and go, you know what, you should wait 4 days till that gets really swollen and then ice it. There's gonna be a huge outbreak is what it's gonna look like. There's gonna be a huge amount of autoimmune diseases, neurological diseases like ALS, Parkinson's, MS, that are gonna be contributed directly to these shots. However, the time between the two of them is gonna allow them to get away with liability.